Welcome to the Duck Dive. Today we're venturing into the world of Danish national security, taking a close look at the Danish Security and Intelligence Service, better known, of course, as PT.
Yeah, PT, Politiets Efterretningstjeneste. We've pulled together information from the agency itself and, related sources to really try and get under the hood.
Exactly. So our aim today is to, well, dissect PTT, understand what it does, how it developed over time, and crucially, how it works to safeguard Denmark.
We'll be looking at its structure, its main jobs, its responsibilities, and also the oversight, how it's kept in check.
Right. And why should you, our listener, care about this? Well, maybe you're interested in national security generally, or the history of these kinds of agencies.
Or perhaps that tricky balance a democracy has to strike between keeping people safe and protecting civil liberties.
Definitely. This should offer some really compelling insights, hopefully. Okay, so let's start unpacking it. Where did PT actually begin? It goes back quite a way, before World War II even.
That's right. Back in 1939, as things were getting tense in Europe, the Danish police saw a need for something more specialized.
A dedicated security body.
Precisely. And that led to the creation of Sikkerhedspolitiet, SIPO, the security police. It was made official by an act in March 1939.
And its job description back then.
It was pretty clear, providing a shield against undertakings or actions aimed at the independence of the realm and the legal social system, and also keeping an eye on foreigners and travelers.
Wow. You can really hear the echoes of modern security concerns even back then. Independence, legal system, supervision of aliens.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is how they split the work initially. SIPO handled Denmark, but not Copenhagen.
Oh, who handled the capital?
That was Department D of the Copenhagen Police. They'd actually been around since 1927.
And what did Department D do?
All sorts, really. Things like weapons control, radio licenses, but also protecting state visitors. A real mix.
So two separate entities doing similar security work. Okay, fast forward to after the war. Things must have changed then.
They did. Big changes. In May 45, SIPO's job was temporarily given to a new group, the National Commissioner's Intelligence Department, or REA.
Temporarily?
Yeah, because SIPO itself was completely shut down in November 1947.
Okay, so SIPO disappears. Then what?
Well, it took a few years, but on January 1st, 1951, PET, as we sort of know it today, was formally set up, an independent office under the National Commissioner.
And who was the first boss?
That was Ernst Brix. He was the first Director General.
Right. And PT's mission statement today, how's that worded?
It's broad. It's about preventing, investigating, and countering anything that threatens Denmark as a free, democratic, and safe country.
That's a wide remit, and it's purely domestic, right? You mentioned the different intelligence services earlier.
Exactly. That's key. Pete focuses inside Denmark. Foreign intelligence, anything happening abroad, that's the job of the Danish Defense Intelligence Service, the DDS.
Okay, good distinction. PT is the home team, so to speak.
Yeah, you can put it that way, yeah. The domestic shield.
So, structurally, where does PT sit now? Who's in charge?
It's part of the Ministry of Justice. The current head is Finn Borch Anderson, and he reports to the Minister of Justice, Peter Hummelgaard.
And size-wise, we talking big organization.
Pretty substantial, yeah. The sources say between 1,000 and 5,000 employees, and the budget is around 800 million Danish kroner a year.
Okay, that gives a sense of the scale. Where's the HQ?
It was in Buddinge, near Copenhagen. But they also have offices out in Aarhus and Odense.
And they're plugged into the local police, too.
Very much so. Because they work so closely with the national police, they actually have representatives in all the Danish police precincts. So a proper nationwide reach.
Right. And the top leadership structure. Who makes the big calls?
You got the Director General at the top, then directors for operations, legal affairs, and administration.
And below that?
There's a management board. This includes the heads of the key departments. Counterterrorism, intelligence collection, counterintelligence.
Counterintelligence being about protecting their own secrets.
Exactly. Protecting sources, methods, preventing infiltration. Then there's security and something called SIOC.
SIOC.
The sources don't spell it out, but it likely stands for Strategic Information and Operations Center, or something similar. A central hub for coordinating things.
Okay, makes sense. A complex structure for complex threats. Now, let's rewind a bit. The Cold War must have been a huge influence on PET's development.
Oh, absolutely. A defining period. Back then, the big focus was, unsurprisingly, espionage from the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries.
Intelligence warfare, essentially.
That was the thinking. That the Cold War was fought largely through spies and intelligence rather than direct fighting. but the fear of a hot war was definitely there too.
And that fear led to actual physical preparations.
Yes, they built secure bunkers, facilities for the government to use in an emergency. It shows how seriously they took the threat.
And there was that interesting quote from the prime minister back then, Eric Erickson.
Right, in the early 50s, he apparently guided PT to do as little as possible, as effectively as possible.
That really speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About the sensitivity. You need to be effective, but also careful, especially with political intelligence.
Extremely careful, which leads us nicely into the whole question of oversight. How has that changed over the years? Because that's vital in a democracy.
Absolutely paramount. So where did oversight begin?
Well, the first formal body was the Parliamentary Control Committee, set up in 1964. It became known as the Wamberg Committee.
Its job was
to supervise the registrations, basically to check who PT was keeping files on.
And there was a growing awareness about civil liberties around that time, too.
Yes, definitely. In 1968, the government made a clear statement. PD couldn't register Danish citizens just because of their legal political activities.
That seems like a really important line to draw.
A crucial one. Fast forward a bit, and these registration issues came up again with the PT Commission, which looked at the period from 45 to 89.
When did they report back?
Their big report came out in 2009, and that really set the stage for more reforms.
Leading to...
Well, it led to another committee, this one headed by a Supreme Court judge, Hugo Wendler-Peterson. They reviewed all the rules for PT and also for the Defense Intelligence Service.
And their work paved the way for the current law.
Exactly. Their recommendations were key in drafting the Act on the Danish Security and Intelligence Service, the PT Act. That came into force on January 1st, 2014.
Okay, the PEAT Act of 2014. What are the main things it does?
It lays out PT's tasks very clearly. It regulates how they can gather information, how they process it, who they can share it with, and importantly, when they have to delete it.
And it also changed the oversight structure again.
Yes. It created the Danish Intelligence Oversight Board. This is an independent body. It replaced the old Wamberg Committee, and it has its own dedicated staff, its own secretariat.
Independent oversight. But Parliament is still involved, too.
Oh, yes. There's the Intelligence Services Committee of the Parliament. That was set up back in '88.
And what's their role?
They get briefed by the government on important security and foreign policy stuff that relates to intelligence. They also look at the guidelines for the services before they're finalized. And they hear if PIESE doesn't comply with the Oversight Board.
So you've got the independent board looking at data handling and rights, and the parliamentary committee providing political scrutiny, a kind of two-level check.
That seems to be the system, yes. Checks and balances.
Okay, let's shift to what PE actually does day to day, their operational tasks.
You can group them broadly. There's the intelligence side, collecting, analyzing, passing on information about threats.
And the security side.
That's countering the threats they identify, taking action.
Do they also look proactively for weaknesses, like assess potential targets?
Yes, that's a big part of it. Security assessment, identifying critical infrastructure, vulnerable places or events. They do risk assessments, draw up operational plans.
And share that with local police.
Right. So the police districts know what measures need implementing on the ground. Lots of coordination needed there.
Makes sense. What about protecting people? Bodyguards and that sort of thing. That always gets attention.
PT has the national responsibility for personal protection. That covers the royal family, government ministers, MPs, visiting VIPs.
Anyone else?
Yes. Also official representatives, foreign delegations, and crucially, any individual assessed to be under a specific credible threat. They have a dedicated personal protection unit for this.
So it's not just for officials?
No. And it includes security for big events, politicians traveling to risky places, even security around elections or major sports events if Danish athletes are involved.
A very visible part of their job sometimes. Do they also guard buildings?
Yes. There's a security section, part of their special intervention unit, that handles physical security for designated locations, PAT's own buildings, and other temporary assignments.
Okay, the special intervention unit. Sounds like a key team. What else falls under them?
They maintain the high-readiness counterterrorism response capability, ready to react quickly.
The sharp end.
Pretty much. And interestingly, they also have the National Negotiation Team.
Negotiation, like hostage situations.
Exactly. They coordinate all police negotiation tasks, nationally and internationally. Things like kidnappings, people barricaded in buildings. That falls to PT's team within the Special Intervention Unit.
Wow. From intelligence analysis to crisis negotiation, that's a huge range.
There really is.
So if they identify a threat, say through intelligence, what's the next step? Investigation.
Often, yes. The goal is usually early, targeted intervention. This can mean starting a criminal investigation, especially for terrorism, extremism, or espionage.
Do they have special investigators for that?
They do. There's a special center for investigation just for those kinds of complex cases. And they work within the normal legal framework, the Administration of Justice Act, collaborating closely with the regular police and the prosecution service.
So not operating in a silo, they're tied into the standard justice system.
Right. That collaboration is key.
What about preventing things before they happen? Radicalization is a big concern globally.
Prevention is definitely a major focus for PD. They work with lots of other agencies, the prison service, municipalities, the Danish Center for Prevention of Extremism, the National Police.
A network approach.
Yeah, and they also focus on training, educating staff in schools, social services, places like that, to help them spot early signs of radicalization.
Proactive work, trying to stop threats developing in the first place.
Exactly. It's not just about reacting.
Let's dive a bit more into the intelligence work itself, the analysis side. What does that look like?
Well, the core aim is providing that up-to-date, accurate intelligence picture, identifying threats, giving early warning. It's systematic work, especially in counterintelligence and counterterrorism.
Protecting Denmark's secrets and stopping attacks.
Fundamentally, yes, but they also provide security advice outwards.
To who?
To private companies, other public bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Advice on how to protect themselves from terrorism, espionage, maybe attempts by foreign states to illegally acquire sensitive technology or information.
Okay, and they produce reports, assessments.
Constantly. Threat assessments, analytical reports. They try to identify, assess, and ultimately prevent security threats through this analysis.
What kind of threats are we talking about?
It can be very specific, assessing the risk to a particular person or a location or an upcoming event. But they also do broader analyses looking at trends.
Like what?
Things like militant Islamism,
Mm-hmm.
right-wing extremism, left-wing extremism too, espionage threats from specific countries, illegal procurement networks, foreign interference in Danish politics or society.
And they use all sorts of information for this. Classified stuff, open source.
A mix of everything.
Yeah.
Classified intelligence, diplomatic reporting, police information, public sources. They pull it all together.
And who reads these reports? Is it just for PTT's internal use?
Primarily, they guide PD's own operations and planning, but they're also shared widely with other relevant public authorities, government ministries, other agencies, police districts. They need that information too.
So there's a degree of information sharing, at least within government. What about transparency with the public? Do they share anything?
They do make an effort, yes. They publish some things, assessments, reports, guides. Some are annual, some ad hoc. They have a website, try to explain their role.
And they release an annual report.
Yes, an annual public report. It gives us a sort of general overview of extremist activities and the overall threat level, but naturally, it's quite general. Doesn't give away operational secrets.
It's that balancing act again, isn't it? Informing the public versus protecting sensitive operations.
Always. And like many agencies, PET has faced criticism about that balance.
When was that?
There was criticism back in the late 90s about them being too closed off, too secretive, which probably pushed some of the transparency efforts we see now.
And more recently, any controversies?
Well, the Director General, Jens Madsen, resigned back in 2015. That followed a critical report looking into how the agency handled the Copenhagen shootings earlier that year.
Right, those major incidents always put agencies under the microscope.
Intensely so. Public and political scrutiny.
One last area that often sparks curiosity: bodyguards. We know PIT provides personal protection. Is it public knowledge who gets this protection?
Pete is usually very tight-lipped about specifics for obvious security reasons, but some individuals are publicly known to have permanent protection.
Like who?
Currently, that includes members of the royal family like Mary of Denmark and Margaret II, and the current Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen.
Okay, the top state figures. Are there others, maybe not permanently, but who have had full-time protection?
Yes, based on public reporting over the years, people like the politician Rasmus Paludan, Pia Kjærsgaard, former PMs Helle Thorning-Schmidt, and Lars Løkke Rasmussen, Noser Connor.
Also non-politicians.
Yes, the cartoonist Kurt Westergaard, who drew the controversial Mohammed cartoons, Prince Joachim, and the writer Lars Hedegaard.
So quite a range of people who've been assessed as needing that high level of security.
For various reasons, yes.
Yeah.
They were deemed to be facing significant threats at different times.
Okay. Well, as we wrap up this deep dive on PIT-Key, what are the main takeaways for you?
I think first, just the long history. Seeing how it grew from that pre-war SIPO into the complex agency it is today. Second, the sheer range of tasks. Intelligence, counterterrorism, protection, negotiation. It's incredibly broad.
Yeah, the scope is pretty amazing.
And third, the oversight. The fact that there are these significant checks and balances, the independent board, the parliamentary committee, it shows an attempt, at least, to grapple with accountability.
For me, it really comes back to that core tension, the need for security versus the need to protect individual freedoms in a democracy.
That tightrope walk.
Exactly. You see it in the history, the debates about registration, the structure of the oversight today. It's a constant challenge for agencies like Pete everywhere.
Which really leads to a final thought for you, the listener. Thinking about the future, threats are always changing, becoming maybe more complex, more digital.
So how do agencies like Pete adapt? How do they stay effective against new threats while still holding on to those democratic values?
And tied into that, what role does public trust play? How important is it for Pete or any agency like it to have the public's confidence to do its job?
Definitely something to think about. A critical question for any modern democracy.